Imagine standing at the edge of an invisible cliff you never knew existed. You've clawed your way up for months, watching the digits in your bank account slowly, agonizingly climb until they finally hit that magical 5-digit mark: $10,000. It feels like a shield, a moment of pure victory against the struggle. But here is the brutal, shocking truth. This milestone is actually a predator in disguise. For the vast majority of people, that $10,000 is a ghost. It's a phantom that vanishes faster than the sweat it took to earn it, leaving you stranded back at square one, hollowed out and wondering if the game was rigged from the start. Welcome to Lily Invests. I've spent 17 years deep inside the high-stakes world of investment banking, watching how the elite manage their capital while the rest of the world works itself to the bone just to stay in place. Before I reveal the secret map, I exhumed from the vault to ensure your milestone becomes a legacy instead of just a memory. Please subscribe to support this channel. It is the fuel that allows me to keep bringing these investigative insights to you. Why does this specific number determine the next 40 years of your life? In my nearly 2 decades as an accountant for the 1%, I discovered that $10,000 is the ultimate psychological fork in the road. It is a financial crossroad where your future is decided by a system that profits from you staying quietly broke. I've lived in the tension of seeing 10-caler launch a fortune and seeing it fuel a total collapse. I'm here because I'm haunted by a simple question. Why do we let our hard-earned wins evaporate? I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here as your investigative companion to pull back the heavy curtain of the financial world and show you exactly how the system is rigged to steal your momentum the second you succeed. We aren't just looking at a balance sheet. We're looking at the blueprint for your freedom. Listen closely, because the choice you make right now is the only bridge to the person you want to become. This invisible cliff isn't made of external forces. It's built from the very architecture of your own mind, the moment those 5 digits hit your screen. When you've been grinding, sacrificing, and saying no to every minor impulse just to reach this milestone, your brain undergoes a dangerous chemical shift, something we in the vault call the windfall effect. Suddenly, that hard-earned $10,000 stops looking like a foundation and starts looking like a prize. You begin to tell yourself the most seductive lie in the financial world: I deserve this. After months of deprivation, your psyche is starving for a yes, and having 5 figures in the bank feels like permission to finally indulge. You feel like you've crossed the finish line of a marathon, so you allow yourself one small celebration to mark the occasion. But here is the anatomy of a self-sabotage that I've witnessed more times than I can count. These celebrations are never isolated events. They are the first cracks in the dam. Once you spend that first $500 on a new phone because your old one felt outdated, or a weekend getaway you convinced yourself you needed, you haven't just reduced your balance. You've broken the sacred seal of your discipline. Lifestyle creep doesn't arrive with a loud bang. It creeps in through a series of entirely reasonable decisions. You convince yourself that because you have $10,000, you can finally afford the slightly nicer dinner, the better subscription, or the minor luxury you've had your eye on. I have watched bank accounts bleed out in a slow, agonizing vanishing act that follows a predictable, tragic script. It starts at $10,000, then slips to $9,200 for a needed tech upgrade. Then it's $8,500 because of a series of celebratory nights out. By the time it hits $7,800, your brain still tells you that you have plenty, but then the real world strikes with a cold indifference. A transmission failure, a medical copay, or a sudden home repair hits, and because your daily spending habits have already shifted upward to match your new perceived status, that emergency doesn't just sting, it wipes you out. You end up back at $2,000, demoralized and bitter, convinced that building wealth is an impossible dream reserved for someone else. You didn't lose that money to the market. You lost it to a version of yourself that mistook a starting line for a trophy. This is the quiet betrayal of the lottery mindset, and it is the primary reason most people stay trapped in a cycle of perpetual restart, forever chasing the same $10,000 while the elite use their foundations to build empires. To understand why we fall so easily into this trap of celebration, we have to look at the cold, hard numbers that define our shared financial reality. When you open your banking app and see that 5-digit figure staring back at you, you are witnessing a miracle that most of the people you pass on the street will never experience in their entire lives. We live in a world where roughly 40% of our neighbors couldn't even cover a sudden $1,000 emergency without reaching for a credit card or a high-interest loan. Having $10,000 in liquid cash already places you in a position of power that nearly half the population is still desperately dreaming of. You should feel a profound, soul-deep sense of pride for the discipline it took to get here, because you have successfully built a buffer that separates you from the desperate, razor-thin edge of total financial collapse. But here is where the paradox becomes truly dangerous for your long-term survival. While $10,000 is a monumental victory in the context of the average person's struggle, it is simultaneously completely insignificant in the context of true financial security. It is enough to survive a minor crisis, but it is nowhere near enough to retire on. It won't buy a home in any major market, and it barely covers a few months of existence if your primary income were to vanish tomorrow. This is the $10,000 paradox. It feels like a fortune when you're looking down from the cliff, but it's barely a drop in the bucket when you're looking up at the mountain. This money isn't wealth yet. It is merely the concrete slab for a structure you haven't even begun to frame. If you make the mistake of treating that slab like the finished house, you're going to find yourself sleeping in the cold when the first real storm hits. The elite I worked for didn't view 10,000 as a destination. They viewed it as the minimum price of admission to finally start the real game. If you stop now, you aren't rich, you're just well prepared to go back to being broke. Seeing this paradox play out in the cold, hard reality of high finance was perhaps the most eye-opening part of my 17-year career in the vault. I remember sitting in those mahogany-paneled boardrooms, reviewing personal financial statements for executives earning $250,000 a year, statements that would honestly make your skin crawl. These were the boardroom broke. They had the tailored suits, the prestigious titles, and the corner offices, but behind the scenes, they were performing a high-stakes tightrope walk with absolutely no net. They had skipped the essential $10,000 foundation phase entirely, moving straight into $8,000 monthly mortgages and luxury car leases that cost more than some people's total monthly income. They were playing a desperate, exhausting game of musical chairs with their capital, terrified of the moment the music might stop, because they had zero liquid breathing room. They were wealthy by appearance, but in reality, they were just one missed bonus away from a total public collapse. Contrast that with a man I'll never forget, let's call him Elias, who worked in the maintenance department of one of our satellite offices. Elias didn't have an MBA or a high-frequency trading bot. He earned about $45,000 a year. But Elias did something the executives were too proud to do. He treated his first $10,000 like a sacred, living seed. When he finally hit that milestone in his late 20s, he didn't see a down payment for a shiny new truck or a reason to celebrate and upgrade his lifestyle. He saw a fortress. He took that $10,000 and split it with the surgical precision of a diamond cutter, protecting it from his own impulses and the crushing noise of the world. By the time he retired, Elias had a larger liquid net worth than some of the junior analysts who had been making triple his salary for over a decade. The difference wasn't the math of their income, it was the mission of their capital. Elias understood that real wealth is built by people who treat their first 5 figures as a point of no return, a sacred baseline they refuse to ever fall below again. The boardroom broke view money as a way to belong to a certain social class, while the truly wealthy view money as a way to never have to belong to anyone but themselves. It is never about how much flows into your account. It is about the soul of the person managing the flow, and whether they have the courage to choose a quiet, solid foundation over a loud, hollow, and ultimately fragile performance. This difference in soul isn't just a philosophy. It's a tactical execution that has to happen the very second those 5 digits appear on your screen. You have to understand that the moment you hit $10,000, you are in a race against your own evolutionary biology, which is why I live by the 24-hour rule. You have exactly 1 day to assign this money a mission before your brain begins its sophisticated campaign of self-sabotage, hunting for reasonable excuses to reward your hard work. Wealthy people don't let their capital sit idle in a checking account where it's vulnerable to their own moods. They architect a system of friction. You must split that $10,000 immediately, dividing it into 2 distinct buckets that serve entirely different masters. The first bucket is what I call your emergency fortress, and it should hold between $3,000 and $5,000. This is not just a savings account. It is your psychological armor against the world's unpredictability. To make it a true fortress, you have to move it to a high-yield savings account at a completely different financial institution, one that doesn't even have an app on your home screen. We want to create friction, a physical and digital barrier that forces you to wait 48 hours for a transfer. This friction is the only thing standing between an impulsive need and your long-term survival. When the car transmission fails or a medical crisis hits, you draw from the fortress. But for anything else, that money simply does not exist. The second bucket is your wealth engine, consisting of the remaining $5,000 to $7,000. This is no longer money in the way you've been taught to think about it. It is now capital. This is your seed corn, the offensive force that you send out into the world to work while you sleep. The psychological brilliance of this split is that it forces your primary checking account back down to a level that feels slightly uncomfortable. By moving $5,000 to $7,000 into an investment vehicle and $5,000 into a remote fortress, your daily balance looks low again. This creates a state of artificial scarcity that keeps your drive alive. You don't feel rich, so you don't spend like you're rich. You stay in the grind, making careful choices and protecting your margins, all while your wealth engine is quietly compounding in the dark. In the vault, we saw that the people who stayed wealthy were the ones who were masters of this invisible division, treating their liquid cash like a tool for survival and their capital like a sacred trust for their future selves. Once you have physically and mentally partitioned that $5,000 to $7,000 into your wealth engine, the next critical step is deciding exactly which machinery you are going to install in that engine room. In the high-stakes world I left behind, the elite didn't gamble on hot tips or the latest speculative meme coin. They exploited the structural cheat codes built directly into the system, codes that are available to you but rarely explained in plain English. The single most powerful tool for someone starting with their first $10,000 is the Roth IRA. Think of it not just as an account, but as a legal fortress that shields your growth from the government's reach forever. When you put your after-tax dollars into this vehicle, you are essentially giving your future self a massive tax-free raise. If you invest $5,000 today, and through the quiet miracle of compounding, it grows to $50,000 over the next few decades, you don't owe a single penny in taxes on that $45,000 gain. In a standard account, the government would be waiting to take a 20% bite out of your success. But by choosing the right engine, you ensure that every ounce of momentum stays in your pocket. Now, inside that Roth IRA, you need to resist the urge to find a moonshot. The noise of the financial world will try to convince you that you need to pick the next winning individual stock or time the market perfectly. But that is a sucker's game designed to generate fees for the house. The truly wealthy rely on the boring power of broad market index funds. When you buy an index fund, you aren't betting on a single company's CEO or a temporary trend. You are betting on the collective ingenuity and progress of the entire economy. It is the most aggressive move you can make because it is based on the only guarantee the market has ever offered, that over long periods, the world moves forward. Let's look at the cold math of that $5,000 seed. At an average annual return of 7 to 8%, which the market has historically provided over a century, your money doubles roughly every 10 years. That initial $5,000 becomes $10,000, then $20,000, and then $40,000, all while you are sleeping, traveling, or focusing on your career. You aren't trading. You are owning. You are shifting from a laborer who trades time for paper to a capital owner who owns pieces of the machines that generate value. This is the moment you stop playing a rigged game and start owning the casino. It's a 20-year vision that requires a stomach for the mundane, but it is the only path I've ever seen that leads to radical, permanent freedom. While that 20-year vision of compounding growth sounds like a dream, the cold reality of the Monday morning after you hit $10,000 is where most people's resolve begins to crumble. We like to think of ourselves as disciplined, rational beings, but the truth I witnessed throughout my career is that human willpower is a finite, fragile resource. If you rely on motivation to build your fortune, you are effectively gambling your future on how you happen to feel on any given Tuesday. Motivation is a fair weather friend. It's loud when things are going well, but it evaporates the moment you're exhausted, or when your friends invite you on a trip you can't quite afford, or when life simply gets heavy. In the vault, the people who actually built lasting legacies weren't the ones with the most willpower. They were the ones who realized their own weaknesses and an automatic wealth machine that runs whether you're inspired or not. This means setting up transfers that trigger the moment your paycheck hits your account, moving a fixed amount to your fortress and your engine room before you even have a chance to look at it. This creates the invisible money effect, a powerful psychological hack where you learn to live entirely on whatever is left over. If that money never sits in your checking account, you never feel like it's yours to spend. You stop negotiating with yourself because the decision has already been made by the system you designed in a moment of clarity. A system doesn't get tired, it doesn't experience FOMO, and it doesn't care about your bad day. It just grinds, quietly building your freedom in the background while you focus on living your life. Relying on motivation is playing defense against your own impulses. Building a system is finally taking the lead. Once you have your automated systems quietly building that momentum in the background, you're going to face the ultimate test of your resolve, the temptation to spend that entire hard-won foundation on a major life purchase. This is the down payment trap, and it is where most dreams of real wealth go to die. You finally hit $10,000, and the voices around you, and even the one inside your head, start whispering that it's time to put that money to use as a down payment on a house or a shiny new car. It feels like the responsible adult thing to do, right? But from where I sat in the vault, I saw this move destroy more financial futures than almost anything else. When you take your entire liquid life savings and hand it over for a set of keys, you are voluntarily returning your safety net to zero. You move into that house or drive that car off the lot, and suddenly you are asset rich, but cash poor. You have a massive new monthly obligation, and you have absolutely no cushion. If the roof leaks the next month, or if your company announces a round of layoffs, you are in immediate, bone-chilling crisis. You are buying from a position of absolute weakness, and the stress of that vulnerability will age you faster than the work it took to save the money. I've seen families live in beautiful homes while being paralyzed by the fear of a single missed paycheck because they killed the goose that lays the golden eggs just to buy a nicer nest. The people I watched build true, unshakable wealth did something different. They had the discipline to stay the course. They hit 10,000 and kept building until they hit 20, 30, or 50,000. When they finally made that major purchase, they did it from a position of power. They put 20% down and still had their 5-figure fortress sitting untouched in the background. They weren't scraping by to qualify for a loan. They were dictating the terms of their life. It's a game of patience and delayed gratification that the poor find unbearable, but the wealthy find essential. You have to decide if you want the image of success now or the reality of freedom forever. Don't let the system trick you into giving back your momentum just when you finally started to move. Navigating this quiet, disciplined path toward a position of power is a journey that feels remarkably like my current struggle with this very AI technology. Just as I am learning to navigate this alien digital landscape after 17 years in a traditional boardroom, you are learning to master the language of capital, a language that often feels heavy and counterintuitive. It is slow, it is often messy, and I make mistakes every day, but I continue to show up because the truth I exhumed from the vault is simply too vital to keep buried. I want you to take a deep breath and visualize yourself exactly 10 years from today. If you choose to ignore these systems and let that first $10,000 slip through your fingers, you will likely find yourself exactly where you are now. Tired, running in place, and still fighting to save that same first milestone. But if you choose the architecture of the elite today, you are building a life defined by radical choice rather than desperate necessity. You are creating a future where you work because you want to, not because a bank or a boss demands it. This moment is the invisible bridge between being a victim of the system and becoming its master. Join us here at Liley Invests as we continue to pull back the curtain on the machinery of wealth. Stop playing defense, start playing offense. Your future self is waiting for you to lead them toward success. See you in the vault very soon. Peace.